this discovery team in collaboration with CDPS. So for all of you who are viewing today, feel free to say hello, don't be shy, let us know who you are, where you're from in the chat, and we are happy to take questions as the speakers go through their parts of this show and tell this afternoon, so we will keep an eye on the chat. We're also happy to speak in Welsh and answer your questions in Welsh, so I'll just hand over quickly to my colleague Emma, who will let you know about the support that we have available for that for you today.
Shwmae, fi yma I ateb cwestiynau, unrhyw cwestiynau sy'n dod trwy trwy'r Gymraeg, neu os oes unrhyw un am rhoi rhywbeth yn y chat trwy'r Gymraeg, na I cyfieithu. Diolch.
Thank you, Emma. Okay, so what are we going to cover today? We've got a whistle-stop tour of everything that the team has been up to over the last few weeks. So we will cover off an overview of what the Design System for Wales project is. What does it mean? Which is a very big question. We've been finding that through our conversations around terminology, and the team will dig into that a little bit later. An update on our research, so sharing details on the methods and progress made. If you're out there in the audience and you have taken part in our research so far, thank you so much. We'll also delve into some of the emerging themes that we are discovering as we go through this process, and we'll let you know what we're going to be up to next, so a little bit of looking ahead. This happy, excited team of folks are the people that are going to be presenting to you today. So Parago, we work with organisations like CDPS across the public sector to deliver better services through digital. And the way that we work, again, like CDPS, is to have multidisciplinary teams. So you can see the people involved in this discovery span different disciplines from delivery, engagement, comms, research, service design, and technology. I'll let people introduce themselves as they do their part in the show and tell today, so I don't steal anybody's thunder. So before we kick off with the information that we wanted to share with you today about what we've been up to, I just wanted to touch on what a show and tell actually is. So those of you who've been to show and tells before will know that they're a great way to think out loud and work out loud as part of what we call agile delivery. So the way that we are approaching this discovery project is to work in an agile way. It means we break down our tasks into smaller chunks of activity, usually around 2 weeks, and we call those sprints. And a show and tell is a great technique through this process to let folks know what you've been up to. Now, you can do it with a big audience like we've done today, or you can just do it with your colleagues internally, but it's a good practice to have. And you can hear about what teams have been up to so far. Teams will share what they've learned openly. This can be challenges as well as the good stuff, so warts and all. Answer any questions that people might have about the work that you're doing. Explain what you're going to be doing next, because we work in sprints. It means that we do some planning. We don't plan the whole activity. We do that in our 2-week chunks. And really importantly is exploring how this work might relate to other projects. So we know, for example, that there are many design systems out there. There are many people doing great work in avoiding duplication and sharing good practice with services. And we want to make sure through these show and tells that we'll run throughout discovery that we actually align with those people doing work in those areas. Show and tell is part of discovery. So again, just to touch on what a discovery phase is, really what we're doing here is trying to reframe a problem and understand it from the perspective of users. So what are their needs? What's the context? What do people want? What are the requirements around that? And typically a discovery lasts anywhere between 4, sometimes 12 weeks. So we've got an 11-week discovery phase. We're learning about the problem that we've been given, and we're going to be narrowing down areas to focus on and providing recommendations at the end of this process. What we're not doing is jumping straight in with a solution and saying there needs to be a design system for Wales. So that's a really important point to note. So without further ado then, I'll hand over to my colleague Owen, who will give you an overview of what we've been up to over the past few weeks. Thank you, Owen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all. So I'm Owen Burgess, delivery lead at Parago. Really interested in this work because in a previous role, I was in a digital and service design team in a Welsh Government sponsored body. So really intrigued into how we design and develop digital services. And by way of a bit of background, which Ed mentioned, so there are lots of people and organisations developing digital services for the public in Wales. And there are various methods, frameworks, ways in which those people and teams look to do so. What that can mean is sometimes there are inconsistent, disjointed, and some frustrating service experiences for Welsh citizens. And what it can also mean is that sometimes efforts are duplicated, good practice isn't always shared, and things are developed from scratch when similar ones have already been built and learned from and are in place. And this work really explores what are the needs of users of a design system. What are those delivering and developing digital public services in Wales? What do they really need? What are the constraints and the opportunities that prevent them from building and delivering great digital services? So as Corey mentioned, we're not starting with the end in mind here. We're really looking to understand what people need to build and deliver great digital services and what value there could be in a design system. So it's 11 weeks for this period of work, which is the time frame that we've really done quite a bit of planning to ensure that we can make best use of. I'll just talk through that one briefly. So what have we done so far? We're about halfway into this discovery period. And as Corey mentioned, we are working in sprints. What that means is 11 weeks of work when you look at how we start to where we end up in the recommendations can sometimes be a little bit intimidating and daunting. So we've actually broken it down and done quite a bit of planning into what we will do, cover and when. And the first week was really spent on making sure that we'd done that. We were really clear on the objectives, not starting with the end in mind, making it very clear that we wanted to get a good level of engagement and research with everyone working in this space, really, whether they currently use design systems or they're just intrigued into some of the value that they may hold. And in terms of the delivery, we've then broken that 11 weeks down into 2-week sprints. At the beginning of those, we'll be really clear on the goals that we're looking to achieve. We'll meet regularly throughout that sprint to remove any blockers, make sure that we're keeping track of progress, and then we'll review that towards the end, make sure we've completed what we need to, address anything we haven't, and then move on to the next sprint, which usually has a very different focus. So we've placed a big interest on participant recruitment. It was really clear for us here that what we wanted to do is to actually speak with some of the known knowns. So CDPS's existing network, those that we know are already working with design systems will have some really useful insight. We were very keen then to broaden that network. And as Parago, we've reached out to our own network. We often work in the public service space, so we've got some good contacts there and a good reach there. And we've been really active on LinkedIn and through direct mail too, to arrange interviews with those that we think can really add some value and insight to this space. To broaden that even further, the next stage will be a survey, which will allow us to gather some really useful quantitative insight from more of the unknowns, perhaps people that we don't know, who aren't on various different mailing lists or communities of practice, but can really add some value and some insight to this piece. So I'm not going to cover too much in terms of the research, but that's where we are up to date. It's been really intriguing, interesting. And I'll hand over to my colleague Em now, who will provide some of the detail around the research.
So, right, detail around the research. I've had to sort of get all my points down on a bit of paper here because there's so much we've picked up so far. So the desk research that Owen covered off there is predominantly looking at what's out there already at home and abroad, and there's learning that is readily available to us. Some of the obvious design systems that are out there that other people are using is gov.uk, NHS England, the Scottish Gov design system, and the Ontario design system of particular interest because of the need for bilingualism. And of course, the one that has come up frequently for us as well in the conversations is the Welsh Government GEL. While they all offer something a little bit different, there's definitely a familiarity between them all in terms of look and feel. So for us, it was really important to see what was already out there as we headed then into the conversations. We wanted to capture as part of the the desk research as well, the footprint of digital services in Wales. What does it look like right now? And it is huge. We were quite surprised, I think, at the size of the digital footprint out there now, and looking sort of at the variances within the things that exist. There are some commonalities, but very few across the 250 areas that we've looked at so far. Not seeing consistent user journeys, and that really goes to the heart of the problem statement that we're working to. We're looking to identify use of patterns across repeatable tasks, and we're looking for really easily accessible and efficient ways of reaching services as a user. Go into that website for that one thing potentially and wants to tick it off their list with minimal fuss and as few grey hairs as possible. So with the desk research, we got our base there, and then we headed into some individual discussions. I think by the end of this week, we'll be approaching around 30 conversations face to face. We've been overwhelmed by the response that we've had to the invite for people to come and speak with us. And we really have seen a variety from across Wales and in all corners of Wales as well. It was really important that we tried to reach as many different areas within local authority and the sponsored bodies as we could. And the invite's been there to anyone else really working within Wales public sector, maybe in more hidden spaces, that they speak with us, and it's been brilliant. The first slide there that you can see, it really touches on, there's three themes I'm going to talk about here really that stand out for us so far. And one of them is this one, which there is attributed to a delivery manager at a Welsh local authority, but has been repeated elsewhere. And that every time they look at content, the evaluation of content on their website, they're seeing so many discrepancies between the service, the physical service in real life, and the service that someone may have if they go online to do something. And it's evidence really of that sort of lift and shift, lift and drop approach to just getting something on the website, whereas design is a secondary thought. And that's coming up frequently. And what comes with that then obviously as well is the frustration that people feel, and the value that they feel is placed on that thing that they're doing, and the longer term outcome and the benefit that is there for the community that's being lost and for the organisation. But I'll come back on to that in a little bit because it touches upon something else we've picked up. On the second slide that we have there, then it talks a bit about bilingualism. And bilingualism is the obvious sort of point we come to when we look at gov.uk, for example, and why, well, what else does Wales need? It's not the only thing Wales needs, but what else do we need? And the real bilingualism is a really important bit. And something, again, that has come through for us is that when we go out to procurement for systems, often, well, almost probably all the time, we're speaking with people outside of Wales, and when we're speaking with organisations and we're saying we need this to make sure, we need this system to enable us to work bilingually. Yes, we can cover all languages, it's not a problem. We work with all these countries all over the world that can cover the languages. But what we're finding is people are signing up to contracts and bringing systems in-house, and once they're in-house, there's certain things they can't change. There's, there may be buttons that can't be changed. There may be sort of the basic text of the system that can't be changed. You can put stuff in Welsh, but you may not be able to actually have that full interaction through that chosen language because of that system. And that's causing people to doubt the assurance the suppliers are giving. And from a procurement perspective, 250 plus organisations we've looked at, well, that's 250 procurement practices, etc. So, we're not we shouldn't be on our own in this, and there's definitely an appetite amongst the community to look at, okay, how can we come together on some of these things, because it's a massive amount of money, isn't it, that's going and isn't really fulfilling that need that we have through the standards and through delivering what the community wants. And then on the last slide that Sarah's popped up there with a quote, and you may have seen these in some of our social posts lately, it touches on something really significant we've identified, and it goes back a little bit maybe to the first slide I showed you around how people aren't designing with digital in mind, they're just picking up and dropping. People are telling us, and people have told us in numbers really, that they want to be able to go to somewhere where they can pull examples where user-centered design has worked. They want to pull examples that sort of, you know, the case studies that say, look, this is what an organization did, this is how they did it, this is why they did it in this way, and this is what they've achieved, this is the difference that is made to that organization, this is the difference that is made to that community. And where we were seeing that people were asking, you know, for that support in the form of a repository of best practice, it has also been in the same places we're seeing that people have to really push to demonstrate the value of design and to demonstrate the value of working with customers in mind. What we can see is where the more senior levels of an organization really get it and don't see digital as being the website, the work in that area is so much more progressive. We've spoken with lots of frustrated people who have some brilliant pieces of work tucked away in their top drawer because they haven't been able to get it past that sort of the level that they need to get it past in terms of seniority of management for them to understand it. But on the positive side, we've spoken with a few really, really forward-thinking organisations that have done some really innovative stuff, maybe with a small team, have tapped into different design systems, have pulled together what they know they need to do. And in other areas, we've seen whole restructures of teams. Teams have grown, following a DDAP model, and they're there and they are delivering something really good for that community that they serve. So there's lots of learning out there as well, where you have very positive leadership who understand what this means, driving forward really good things. So there's lots of good to take from it as well, I think, and lots of learning for us as part of this. And I think that's probably it. Lastly, from me, the last bit from me is the survey. As Owen mentioned, we've got a survey this week to go that's looking to capture some of the data that we need around this now. But we're really keen to reach as many people as we can who haven't felt that they're able to come forward and speak, or you know haven't been aware of the invite to speak. We've spoken with lots of people who are sort of one-man bands. And then others who are parts of really big organisations, but we want to make sure that everyone gets that chance to speak with us. So the survey will be circulated to you all after this call, sometime after this call, and then we'll also make it available through other networks and channels. But the call to action is the same call to action that was there when we put out the invite for people to speak to us, which is please share it with the people in your teams, please pass it on to others you know who maybe aren't engaged in the networks, etc., but really need to be heard as part of this work. So I'm going to pass to Sarah.
Thank you, Em. Hi everyone, I am Sarah and I'm the communication lead for this project. So I oversee all of the communication and promotion for this project, making sure that both internal and external stakeholders are kept engaged and up to date with the research findings and emerging themes. Over the past few weeks, and after a number of initial discovery sessions with willing participants, there are several key themes that have emerged from the discovery. And what has been interesting for me is being able to draw synergies between my world, which is more of a comms and marketing role, and the themes that designers and service designers have been highlighting to us. Firstly, could the design system be a shared language for success? What has been emerging is that there are mixed understanding of what the design system actually entails and what potential it could hold for the Welsh public services. Also, something that we are keen to explore further is how would we test the effectiveness of a design system once implemented. Something else that has stood out for us is how a design system could potentially enable conversation across departments. One of the biggest challenges that has been identified by our initial conversation is the lack of collaboration between different government departments. Currently, there is little to no connection between teams doing similar work, is what we're being told. Therefore, there could be a hindrance of sharing good practices and resources. So we are keen for our research to delve into a little bit deeper into how a design system, if implemented effectively, could bridge this gap and build a more collaborative environment for teams across different disciplines in the Welsh Public Services. Defining a design system create a shared language and remove ambiguity to ensure that multidisciplinary teams such as communication, marketing and design team produce cohesive outputs. I believe that having a design system is quite similar to having a brand toolkit. Just like a brand toolkit for communication and marketing puts together a cohesive tone of voice to build trust with the end user, a design system could do the same so that the experience across different touch points, whether those be website or forms, is the same for the users. But does it actually matter? Will there be a cost of non-compliance? Something that we are keen to understand a little bit more after our initial conversation is whether a design system could just be a suggestion or what could make it easier for design teams to actually implement and follow a design system. Of course, the design system would put together modules that would make it easier to create content across different digital design points, but we also need to make sure that those are followed and it's not just a nice to have. A design system isn't just about aesthetic, it's also a tool for the future. A design system could align with the Welsh Government focus on improving the well-being of future generations, and it could be a powerful tool for scaling up and maintaining consistent, user-friendly digital ecosystems. Communication materials, so from connecting it back to the communication and marketing world, following a design system could be prototype and test faster, and the iteration and layout could be experimented alongside the design teams. However, all the best design systems in the world would be useless without supportive environment for them to thrive. Something that resonates with me is one of the interviews said, if you could have the best car in the world, but if you don't have the roads to drive it on, it is a useless car. Just like that, a design system needs supportive and collaborative environment for it to foster and build more inclusive audiences and create systems that ultimately help the online journey of the people that need to use them. So in a nutshell, so far our initial conversation have highlighted that a design system could build a collaborative environment where all teams could work together seamlessly and create effectively and user-friendly communication materials. So stay tuned for how we share more design system insights, and we're going to outline as well how a design system could benefit Wales public service landscape. So over to Owen.
Thank you, Sarah. So I was just going to touch briefly on what next. So I mentioned at the beginning we're about halfway through this discovery project. Some really great insight gathered so far through quite a lot of one-to-one interviews. And the next real step is a survey, and that is an opportunity for you to all share your views. And following this meeting, a link to that survey will be sent to you so that you'll have the opportunity to feed into it. And later this week, we'll share that quite widely as well with both our networks, CDPS networks, and even wider still, just to ensure that we're gathering a really wide range of responses. If you've enjoyed this show and tell, and hopefully you have, there'll be a further one on 4th of April, where we'll provide even more of an update and an overview of what we've been working on. And if you find that within that survey there are some questions or some comments or some even things further you'd like to share, please get in contact. Please reach out to me. Myself and the team would be keen to hear from you and discuss that. So my email is listed there. And as mentioned at the beginning too, so Parago are really pleased to be supporting the CDPS with this work. We're often talking about this work on our LinkedIn channel and some of the other work we do too. So in order to keep engaged in that, please, please do look on that, follow us on LinkedIn, and you'll see regular updates regarding this work. Hopefully that was a really good overview of what we have been doing within this discovery over the last 6 weeks or so. So yeah, at this point, myself and the team just wanted to open up to any questions, really. So feel free to pop them in the chat or raise your hand or just check them out.
We've got one in the chat already. Just going to track back. So Peter, hello there. Yeah, great points on Brad Frost and global design system and pointing out what's happening elsewhere outside of the UK too. And Jana, hello. So Jana is wondering if we might be able to share what the research questions are and the key things that we are looking to learn as a result of those questions. So I'll pass that back to the team.
Yeah, I can share the problem statement actually into the chat so that you have that there, Anna. And the survey will be coming out, but I will have a look. I will also pull out some of the other points around the key things we were looking to establish as part of this. And I'll also share that into the chat. The question from Gwen o Cori, beth yw'r cyfle sialens chi wedi dod allan o'r cyfnod yma o ymchwil? Ydych chi'n fwy beth yw'r cyfle sialens chi wedi dod allan o'r cyfnod yma o ymchwil? Ydych chi fwyaf cyffrous amdano? So what are we most excited about the opportunities or the challenges that have come out of this piece of work, exciting piece of work so far? I think for me, it's been having the conversations with people who, I think there are people out there who are struggling in very small teams. And I think for me, it's being able to have conversations with those people and sort of be able to take from them really, okay, what would make your life easier? How could you do things differently? Where are the gaps that you see? And have that conversation with them that potentially they aren't having elsewhere, other, in terms of their day-to-day development of their work. So I think that's been an exciting part of doing what we're doing, probably from my sort of strange way of looking at things, I guess. But it feels good to be able to let people know that the CDPS are looking at the opportunities to sort of drive consistency and help people out there. And in the team, have you got any thoughts?
I've really enjoyed seeing and translating a design system and the design principles of it into more a communication and engagement environment to make sure that we understand and always put the user needs first. So what often tends to happen is design teams work in silos, marketing and comms team work in different silos, and the people that develop the services and do the research testing also work in silos. What I've enjoyed seeing is how a design system could be the overarching solution to all of that, to make sure that whatever you create, you always have the user needs and the end user in mind, so that people that use your services actually always have a consistent experience, whether that be through text touch points, so for example, whether it's a blog post or a landing page, or actually whether it's through the using of the service itself, is making sure that we always have the similar tone of voice and ensure that the user journey are as friendly and as inclusive as possible as well.
question there from Benji. Do you have an idea yet of who the users of the design system will be? Is it practitioners like interaction designers and content designers, or maybe stakeholders like service owners and procurement teams? Does anyone want to pick that up, or shall I pick that up? I'll pick it up. Oh, Corey, you're off mute.
No, I was just going to come in and say, actually, back to Gweno's with the challenge and excitement are kind of the same, and it plays into Benji's question, which is understanding what a design system actually is and what it means. I think there's lots of options around it, and what we found is that folks are doing lots of good practice, but maybe not labeling it in the way that we would call it a design system. So actually getting people to understand that they're following these practices in the first place and sharing that is a really interesting point. And Benji, I suppose that kind of a step back from your question is there the need for the design system in the first place? I think that's what this discovery is still wrestling with, is stepping back and thinking, well, what is the need? What are the requirements? And so before we even think about who might use it, we're still playing with that question of existing models, things that have been learned from those models, the scale and size of the opportunity in Wales, what would differentiate a design system from Wales from other great design systems that are out there. So I think that's still to be discovered.
Question there from Nia, which I think picks up on some of the governance aspects that are coming through to us quite strongly, which is creating the right conditions for people to be willing and able to use a design system. Seem like one of the biggest problems/risks. How will you decide if a design system is the right product? It's a really important point, Nia, and is something it touches on a conversation that we've had in our group. We've gone round and round and round, haven't we, discussing that around, the environment has to be right. A design system will bring many opportunities potentially, but the effectiveness of that design system is still heavily reliant on the organisation itself and how that organisation sees the value of design and digital, and it is it's a huge risk. And so how will you decide if a design system is the right product? It's not for us to decide, I don't think. It's for us to present back on the findings and the voice of the community in terms of what may or may not be required, but there is absolutely something there around the environment for something to succeed and the governance element specifically. Am I picking up all these questions to field? I'm going to field another one. I'm going to jump in and field this one and someone else can pick it up. Peter asks, inclusivity was mentioned at Patterns Day. Another point, inclusivity was mentioned at Patterns Day. Another point was made that although the design system was accessible, the products built using the design system were not, because the development/design teams didn't know accessibility.
Yes, another really interesting point, isn't it? And actually, in the survey, some of the questions that we have in there are touching on this in terms of people's confidence around areas like accessibility, inclusivity, making sure that we have a kind of gauge from the folks who take the survey of how confident they feel, and then the types of tools and techniques that they're using to realise that. And I'll be really intrigued to see what we get back from that for sure. But a really interesting point. Again, it goes back to that having the best car, doesn't it? If you don't have roads to drive it on, so it's the conditions for success, which are coming out of a lot of these questions in the chat. Anything else to add from any of the team?
No. I'll go on it.
So I'll pick up on Gabby's question, Gabby. So you've asked, are you seeing any themes that might indicate something else that could solve the user's problems better than a design system? So probably not at this point, and I don't think we're at the point where we determine what those things could be. But there are probably 2 points that we've seen as themes related to that. And I think, firstly, one of them is around the natural tension between those developing digital services and those that then may own the service. So often the service owner will have their own idea of how many steps or processes or parts of that service need to be in place, because they always have been historically. And then we've got people really trying to design the best digital experience based far more on user need. And actually, there's often some real tension and a struggle to be able to do that, because a service team or a service owner has their own ideas of what that service should consist of. So I think there's definitely a theme there around constructive challenge and governance, and what that looks like to actually be able to meet user needs. Because there's a natural tension between those that own services and those that are trying to develop them with more of a user-focused hat on. And I guess secondary to that, there's definitely something there around the governance and a culture of leadership within organizations. So, point that many of my colleagues have made already, we've heard a lot about you need the right environment. You know, a design system, or whatever it's termed in itself, could be a great product, but if the environment and the conditions aren't there for it to be used, if there are no consequences of not using it, or if people are able to use some of it but completely disregard others, then actually meeting the user's need will be very tricky to do without that sort of standards or the governance around it. That probably hasn't answered your question, Gabby, fully. But I think we're seeing some themes that are related to that we need to explore further throughout the discovery.
Can I come in on that, Owen? I think something that we have discussed is that there may be a need for a design system, but there may also be a need for other things ahead of the design system. If it was a case of prioritizing where energy could be expended, you know, if it does come down to we can't have everything at the same time, then I think there's potentially some things that would need to be addressed ahead of that. But yeah, we're not there yet. Sarah, Anna is really happy that you're bringing the comms voice to the table in relation to design.
Thank you. I have been finding it really fascinating as well. My background is a mix of private sector and public sector. So I think that even though often the two environments that looked differently, I think there's definitely synergies. And even from a comms point of view, as you'll probably know, Anna, we do tend to follow guidelines, especially irrespective of the size of a company. The tone of voice needs to be followed. Otherwise, when we write comms, whether it's an email, a blog post, a case study, and then share it on social media, it could look scatty if we always use different images, tone of voices, or if we make it sometimes serious, sometimes less so. So I think we already do that in different capacity, but it's also important making sure that we collaborate with different teams. And we all follow the same guideline and same guidance. So I'm really enjoying this project. And in fact, I've written a blog post as well, which will soon be shared on the Prago website, into more details into what the specific themes are and how they relate back to my comm role, and from almost like a external point of view, external to the design world, and how they might translate for us comms practitioners as well.
There's a question there from Nia. Do you plan to look at the design maturity of organisations in Wales? That is something that's coming through, Nia, as part of this, and that's probably one of the things that I referenced there around, you know, if there was an order in which things needed to be done, what's the order in which they need to be done, and what is required to make a design system successful. So I think that's part of a bigger question, really.
I can't see the question, Em and Corey. Are there any more questions from the chat?
No. Joanna says has dropped a document in there in relation to language inclusion and Services Week. So that looks like a really interesting piece to have a look at. Thanks for that, Jo. No, I don't think there's anything else in that.
Great questions though, folks. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
We just wanted to hear from you today, and So we have put together a couple of questions. This is an interactive exercise. So if you have a mobile phone to hand, you could take a screenshot of the QR code, which will direct you to our active poll. Or if you prefer, you can visit the Slido website and add in the code that you see below. We just want to hear from you, and we wanted to know what words would you use to describe a design system, or words come to mind as well. So we'll give you a few minutes to log in. We're always really surprised when doing show and tells and presentation, this works seamlessly. We've been on many calls where it starts glitching and you can see the panic in the presenter's eyes. But it seems like it's working.
There's still time for it to blow up.
I know. I spoke too soon.
Yeah. Emma's also putting problem statements and some of the objectives in the chat, folks, if you want to check those out for the research brief side of things.
I leave this open for a few more seconds, but it's good to see that consistency and accessibility seems to be the most prominent keyword. So that we're glad that within our listeners today, we've been able to put across the thought of consistency and how design system would be able to make systems more accessible to the users. Oh, they're still typing. Okay, seems the typing has stopped. So, unsurprisingly, then the most used keywords used to describe a design system are consistency, patterns, accessibility, and standards. But then we want to hear more from you. How would you rate your familiarity with the design system? So, have you ever used them before? Or you only heard about them? Was today the first time you heard about design systems? It seems to be fairly familiar with design systems, which is good. Okay, seems to be quite high confidence with design systems. Perfect. And then lastly, we wanted to hear from you. What would you expect to see in a design system? So we've talked about it today, what it might include, and we're still conducting research into if indeed a design system is needed and what it could be used for. But if you were to look for a design system, what specific guidance would you expect to find in it? So there's a couple of options as well if you scroll down.
It's also not an exhaustive list, so we are aware of that. If there's anything that you feel strongly about that's not on there, then please drop it in the chat.
Okay, seems to the voting has stopped. So head-to-head typefaces, fonts, colours and styles with components has overtaken it. Okay, I think we've got quite a good picture of what our audience would expect to see in it.
We've got a hand raised from Joanna. Hi, Joanna.
Hi there. I don't know what is meant by an interaction pattern. Is that like heat maps and things?
It's a good question, and I think the fact that you're asking what it is plays into some of our findings already around the people's understanding of things. So yeah, interaction patterns, they can be things like that, but they can also be repeatable ways of doing things. So things that you would follow, that build up a service, for example. So showing you a way of doing things, a bit like a recipe in a recipe book.
Okay.
Gives you a guide of how to make the meal over and over again.
Thanks.
I think the voting is now stopped. So if I just wanted to invite our designer, Liam, to the conversation. Liam, you're quite familiar with design systems. Do you think this is a fair reflection what you would expect to find in one?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think for me, it's a very similar approach here with components, patterns, typefaces, all the sort of foundations you need when you sort of build in these sort of digital services, really. So yeah, I think it's a fair reflection. But again, there's a good point by Benji, and there's about collaboration guidelines in the chat as well, which I think is also, yeah, and another good point we can sort of put into the mix of things we're finding out across all our conversations we've been having as well. So yeah, I think it's a really good reflection. Yeah.
Thank you, Liam. I will stop the voting at home. Time to count. So thank you all for joining. I'll pass it over back to my colleague Ian, Owen and Corey to wrap it up.
I love it blending us together so
I
we
know.
become one person. That's great. Yeah, thank you. I haven't heard that before.
Well, yeah, nothing too much from me. Just, yeah, thank you very much for all making the time this afternoon, and for all of your engagement, both with Slido and in the chat too. Much appreciated. Hopefully we've given you a good overview of our work to date, some of the things that we've found, and some of those key themes. As I say, we'll follow up with you with a link to the survey shortly. And any further questions or any particular things you want to chat through, please do reach out to me. I'd love to take that opportunity to have a discussion. And there's a next show and tell on the 4th of April too. So a sort of update at that point on what we've been working on. So yeah, thank you very much for all of your time and energy this afternoon, and wish you a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.